will give her all. More than welcome.
That's okay. Hi.
Good morning.
Hey, Joe.
You here for the seminar?
How are you? Yeah.
Must be. Welcome in.
Take a seat wherever
Welcome
you'd
in.
like here. Pull up here, or there's a.
You can take this real seat. Oh, no, it's okay. I gotta.
This
Ready
is
to get
Joe.
rolling?
He's one of my clients. This
Hey.
is Jacob.
Jacob, nice to meet you. Thanks for coming.
Trainer extraordinaire.
Becky's probably going to straggle in, so when she gets here, we'll just let her in. Well, thank you all for coming. For those who don't know, my name is Jacob. I know all of you, pretty much. We also have a dog here today that's going to be our little support and crowd cheerleader. I'm a personal trainer and run coach. Like I said, I know a lot of you already. I'm very big on the concept of developing our why in this running world. And if you did not know that about me, that's probably my biggest fun fact. This is Meleah. Today, we are going to be going over unlocking our running form and the gait pattern specifically, but we're going to do it a little differently than you may have seen things in the past. We're going to be talking specifically about 3 different portions of our body. The first one will be the rib cage / upper body, breathing, diaphragm, the way they work with the lower body extremities. Second, we'll go into the pelvis, pelvic girdle, and the different muscles that attach there. And then lastly, we're going to go into our feet. I know, exciting. That's why we're all barefoot, except for Joe. The 3 spots we picked, Meleah and I are very passionate about. And I've personally learned a shit ton from Meleah on these 3 topics as well. And she's quite the wizard on it. So I'm very excited. There are going to be a lot of different things that you probably haven't learned before. And it's going to be very, very hands-on, a lot of movement today. Originally, I said you weren't going to sweat, but you might because it's 1,000 degrees in here. So we'll see what happens. And then we'll save some questions for the end as well. Plan for roughly 45 minutes to an hour. Meleah is going to take us.
All right, good. So we want this to be as interactive as possible. So if you have questions, it's like a group learning experience. Okay, so not just us like talking to you, interact, ask questions. That's how we all learn. So this first section here, this is a strongly overlooked portion of our running gait. So we talk about rib cage, upper body. So we're thinking about like our ribs, upper body to our shoulders. So oftentimes we think about like when we're running, we look at arm swing, right? So we look at the symmetry of arm swing. Is it equal? Is it opposite? You know, what does it look like? But what the underlying foundation is your rib cage. So how well does your rib cage move? How does it allow you to move through your upper body? So there's important that it should be able to move in 3 dimensions. Okay, so go ahead and scoot to the edge of your seat for me here, please. So let's just do some testing, and I want you to just feel where you feel restricted with these. So first motion that we often get is we often think like extension, right? So we always think that thoracic extension over a foam roller, something like that to open up our spine. So what I want you to do, think about keeping your hips as stable as you can. Okay, maybe cross your arms over your chest. And what I want you to do is just try to arch your upper back towards the ceiling. And I want that motion, pay attention to where you're getting that motion. So if you're getting the motion from your low back, you've gone too far. So keep your low back nice and stable. Just kind of arch up and then come back and flex forward, okay? So there shouldn't be a ton of motion here that you would appreciate, but you can kind of feel like if it's hard to extend, where are you getting that extension from? Is it your low back or is it truly your upper rib cage? Okay, so that's one dimension, okay? Second plane of motion is if we're forward and we're just kind of tipping side to side. Okay, so again, watch what motion you're getting from your hips, and it should be just a really small motion. So think about bringing your shoulder towards your hip and then the other side. Okay, and kind of appreciate a little bit of motion through there. Perfect. And then the next motion is that rotation motion. So as you're here, you're just kind of rotating. It's almost like you're looking over one shoulder and then over the other shoulder. Okay, and so pay attention to when you feel like your low back is doing the motion versus your rib cage. Okay, our low backs like to take over a lot for that. Okay, so that's our 3D motion. So as we're running, what happens is it's a combination of all 3 of those motions, all at one time, all together. equal and opposite between sides, right? So reciprocal means, like, if you think about arm swing, reciprocal is equal and opposite. So you get that arm swing of motion, and so you also, as you get your arm swing of motion, you also get some rib cage motion with that arm swing, or you should be, okay? So a lot of times with our strength training that we're doing, we're locking things down so much, we're holding everything super stable, that when we go to run, we're not able to extend up and actually use our rib cage motion, okay? So learning how to use that motion is what we're gonna go over a little bit today too, okay? The second piece of this is, a big portion of your rib cage is how we breathe. Okay, so our diaphragm sits at the bottom of our rib cage. A lot of times that can be restricted. So when we think about 3D motion of our rib cage, we think about how well our diaphragm can move, and we can inhale and we can exhale. And we're gonna get to this in a second. Okay, actually we're gonna get to it right now. So what I'm gonna have you do is you're going to come onto your backs on the floor. So we have some mats here. So if you want to share mats, and what you're gonna do is just kind of laying on your back, knees bent, in like a really just comfortable position where your spine can kind of relax into the floor. If you want mats, or you can just lay on the floor too.
Does anyone else
Totally
want a
fine.
mat?
This way, right?
Do you want a mat?
I'm good. Yeah.
You good?
Kaylee, do you need one?
Like this. We can both use
We got a third one over here.
Okay,
Here, you can use this one.
you're good. We know. Okay, so what I want you to do first is just kind of tune into, so feel your spine on the floor, feel your back relaxing into the floor. Okay, and what I want you to do, just kind of nice, easy breathing. I want you to just tune into how you're breathing. Okay, don't have to overthink it. Don't have to force your breath. Just think about how you're breathing, what motions you feel. Okay, now what I'm going to have you do is you're going to take one hand on your belly, one hand on your rib cage. Okay, upper rib cage. And what I want you to do is now take a deep breath in, and as you breathe in through your nose, breathe in. Okay, and then go ahead and let it out. Good. And then where do you feel that motion coming from? So some might feel it like predominantly in your belly, in your tummy. Some might feel your chest. Some might feel both all together. Okay, if both all together, excellent. That's what we want. Okay, so in this position, what I want you to think about, to really think about engaging your diaphragm, I want you to think about, as you inhale, try to expand into your belly, expand into your chest as much as you can. And as you do that, if you think of your diaphragm as a balloon, think about that balloon kind of descending down into your abdomen. And then as you exhale, let it come back up again. So inhale in, let it descend down, almost like a stretch in through your tummy. Good. And then as you exhale, let it come back up. It doesn't have to be forceful, just exhale, let it come back up towards your ribs. Good. And you should feel a little bit of motion. So it's not a ton of motion, but you can just appreciate a little bit there as well. Okay. Anybody have any questions here? What you're supposed to be feeling? How about what you are feeling?
Some upper chest is okay.
Some upper chest is okay. Yeah. So you want kind of a combination between abdomen and then upper chest also. So it should, like, as you inhale, both hands kind of raise at the same time. As you exhale, both descend at the same time too. Yeah, good question. Yeah. Okay. Tummy. Yeah. So if you feel mostly tummy, that means you need some work through rib cage. Right. So if you think about your diaphragm wants to descend down into your abdomen, like, you're not getting that expansion of rib cage. Okay. Also think about, like, if you inhale, does that feel hard? Or if you exhale, does that feel hard? That'll also give us some information. And that's a rabbit hole we won't go down quite yet today. But just note it, pay attention to it, okay? But it just says that there could be some work of mobility through your rib cage also, okay? If you wanted to work if any direction feels challenging to you, work a little bit more of that inhale motion or that exhale motion, okay? But for now today, we're just kind of paying attention, cueing into how you're breathing, and making sure we get that good expansion through both abdomen and chest as well too. Okay, and then exhale out. Okay, excellent. Okay, good. So from here, I'm going to have you come and sit on up. Anybody have questions on that one? You good? Okay.
Now we're all nice and relaxed.
Now we're nice and relaxed. Also good for relaxation. Yeah. Okay. This next one, what we're going to do is the next one is under stabilize here. So this is that rotation and coordination. So this is going to be that extreme, not extreme, but like reciprocal motion of your rib cage, and we're going to find some of those areas where you feel a little bit tight and restricted. So do you want to demonstrate it?
Yeah.
Okay, so Jacob's going to come down to kneeling. Okay, and you can kneel tall or you can sit back on your heels, either one. Okay, so what he's going to do from here is going to bring hands to chest here. Yep, right here. And so what we're thinking about is there's a clock kind of on his elbow. Okay, and on that clock, so actually it's like a giant clock, like out here. Okay, so that clock, what he's going to do, he's going to bring one elbow to 12 o'clock and one elbow to 6 o'clock. Yep. And what I want you to do is you're going to look to that top elbow. So you're always going to keep track of that top elbow. Okay. So from that top elbow is going to trace that clock from 6 o'clock all the way backwards to 12 o'clock. So you're going to circle all the way around, kind of back this way. And then let that elbow come down around that clock here. And as that happens, watch what happens to your other side. It wants to pop back up. If you keep those elbows square, it pops back up. And as soon as this elbow gets down to the bottom, yep, he's going to turn his head and look to the top here. Okay, so elbows at top at 12 o'clock. There you go. Okay, now from here, top elbow is going to circle back around that clock, back side of that clock. As you come around, top elbow is going to point up to the ceiling there.
This feels incredible.
And every time that top elbow comes up, you're going to turn your head and look up to that top elbow. Yeah, good. And then you're going to go ahead and bring it back around. So the important part here is that you bring that elbow back around that back side of the clock. Really get that extension through one side of your rib cage. Yep, and then as it comes back down, circle back around. All right.
Is there a specific way we should sync our breathing with this?
Not necessarily, just make sure you keep breathing. Yep.
Good morning, Becky.
Good morning. Yeah, and as soon as you get that elbow to the bottom, you're going to turn your head up to that top elbow. Yep. So from here, think about really getting that elbow behind you, really get that extension through that top elbow and rib cage. And as you come around, that other elbow is going to come through. Okay. So if you feel this a lot in your low back, if you feel any low back issues, low back tension, what you can do is come and sit back on your heels. Okay. Yes. So sit back on your heels, and that'll take your spine, your low spine out of it. And then you can really feel for where am I achieving in that motion with my low back and my lower spine. Okay. So come back, and now that you did it on tall kneeling, come down to short kneeling or kneeling. And now do that same thing. So keep shoulders over hips here. Okay. Same thing. Tip one elbow up towards the ceiling. Yep. And as you tip, feel one side of your rib cage expand, the other side shorten. And then as that comes back, bring that top elbow back around like you're following that clock. And as you do that, top elbow comes up to the ceiling. Okay. Then it's the opposite. So one side of your rib cage expands, the other side contracts. Okay. You might feel less motion here because we took your low back out of the picture. Who feels less motion in this position? Yeah.
So
trying.
we can start on our knees and kind of progress into it.
Yep, start on your knees so you kind of get that general motion. And it's going to be, as you're running, you're going to get a little bit of that motion it's going to carry from your trunk all the way down into your lower spine. But if we really wanted to isolate what happens in our upper trunk and our rib cage, sit back on your heels. Okay? All right, questions, concerns with that one?
Do we feel loose?
No.
All right. Who feels restriction with that?
Oh, yeah.
Who feels the same restriction on both sides? Right? So it's different, right? And so that's where we get a lot of our issues with running. So we have more mobility on one side than the other. So we tend to develop some of those gait abnormalities. So you get more motion in one spot. And that motion through your upper body is going to influence what happens at your hips and your lower body too. Okay. So we won't get into the dirty details of that, but just know that that does influence it. So just work that general mobility of your upper core, of your upper trunk. Will pay big in your hips too. All right.
So those two exercises that we just did, you could do those daily, before every run, bike, when you get up in the morning, when you go to bed. But if you do those daily, you'll see drastic change. And you can also think about that when you are doing your running or skiing or whatnot. The breathing specifically is a great way to channel into that parasympathetic nervous system too, that if you know Kaylee, she's a big fan of. So there's way more things we can do with these exercises than just directly tie them into running. But obviously that's why we're here. Okay. the strength portion of the upper body. If there's kind of one exercise that I think most of us should be probably doing a lot of, this is the one. And if you've worked with me before, you've definitely done them already, okay? We're gonna go over 2. I'm gonna have everyone stand up. We're gonna get some rotation work into that rib cage area. I'm gonna teach this first without these, and then we're gonna see if we can tie those to like treadmill or something.
Perfect.
Now, when we talk about the upper body and the rib cage, if you think about your rib cage facing this direction, your shoulder blades line it right behind the rib cage. So you have rib cage, shoulder blades, all right? Now, when we run, the shoulder blades, that reciprocal inhibition, that rotation that Meleah was talking about, when we're running, as one foot goes forward, the opposite rotator cuff rotates with it, okay? So it's kind of like, you know, crawling, walking, running, whatever it is. As you step forward, the opposite hand goes forward, right? It's like the exaggerated form would look like this. All right, so when we're in this position for a strength exercise, for our row exercise, we're gonna be 1 foot forward and we're gonna work the opposite side. All right, so I want everyone to take a step forward for me here. We don't need to do any lunge or anything specific crazy like that yet. And I want everyone to just reach forward, kind of like if they had a pulley in their hand. All right, if you extend the fingertips as far as you can, you might already kind of start to feel a little bit of a stretch going on, and that's good. I want that. All right. That's that shoulder blade shifting over the rib cage, right? From here, a lot of times when we do the row exercise, we just pull, right? And there isn't a lot of intention behind it. And I want to change that. I'm going to challenge that today. When we're doing this row exercise, I want you to, before you do any pulling, I want you to actually think about rotating your elbow inwards, okay? Driving the elbow inwards, think about that arm bone, sticking it further out. It's going to elongate the shoulder blade even more, all right? So from here, you're driving forward, okay? Then you're gonna think about pulling the elbow to the rib cage. And as I do that, my upper shoulder region is not following yet, all right? Elbow to the rib cage, shoulder stays up. You'll notice that your rotator cuff back there, okay, that whole area might start to feel a little pull, and your shoulder blade shouldn't have moved, okay? From here, now, we get into that rotation we were just talking about with Meleah, we rotate the whole body backwards, okay? So you reach forward, slight rotation. I'm sweating. Could be because of the run before this too. Slight rotation forward, elbow to the rib cage, and then we rotate, okay? On the opposite side, the arm is going to mimic exactly the opposite of what you're doing right now, okay? So this arm is forward, this arm is back, okay? You can even open it up a little bit and get a ton of rotation there. Okay, you do a slight rotation of that humerus bone, elbow to the rib cage, you rotate, and you drive forward. Okay? Makes sense? Everyone?
Why are we doing it in 2 parts? Why are we pulling our arm and then pulling
Learning purposes. Yep, so as you get comfortable with it, you can just put it in to one. Yep.
Also, just a quick cue, watch where your hips are pointed also. So think about trying to keep your, even though we're in this split stance position, keep your hips square so both hip bones are pointing forward, and to really get that motion come from your upper trunk versus your hips. So just watch that position.
Okay.
You might feel a little bit more.
Let's see how we can jerry rig some bands. We're gonna go around treadmills. I think if we put the handle, or through the handle, this should be able to work.
Oh, yeah.
I'm just jealous. I'm jealous that you're sitting.
Oh my god.
Yeah, this will work. Yeah.
One might be a little intense, but
Yeah.
all right.
No, that'll work. So we're gonna go in groups. No, actually, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah. So we're gonna have everyone grab one of their bands. There's 4. No, there's 5 set up. Perfect.
Yeah.
There's a band for everyone. You
Go ahead
can
and grab
go
one.
reach and grab yours. That's right. We added a group member.
Yeah.
Now we have 6. Okay, I want you to step back so you have a little resistance on that band. If you're holding it, that's everyone hold with their right hand so it's matching. Left leg is forward, and you can play around with this resistance as we start doing this here. Okay. Right leg is back. We're going to let that band take us in and get a nice stretch of that lat. Let the arm follow through with it. Twist the elbow in. Slight rotation down. Think about twisting like that. Drive your elbow into my hand right here. Slightly bend it here.
It doesn't matter if we're neutral or
Good question. Your hand should be face down.
even when we turn the elbow in? Yes. That's an
Yeah.
extra stretch. Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Face down with the hand. So the hand's face down, the elbow's bent, and you're rotating in. It's going to open up a little bit because you're going to start to pull it towards you, right? But you don't want to do this. Okay. Once you have the elbow slightly in, you can go ahead and pull that elbow to the rib cage and only to the rib cage and reach that left arm nice and far forward. Good, good, good. And then reverse. Work through that. Like Meleah said, keep the hips straight. So you can apply this to any rowing exercise you're doing. If that's a lawnmower pull with a heavy dumbbell, if it's a cable row, if you start doing TRX rows, anything in that rowing ability. Once you get comfortable with this, you can add another element to it as well and make it a little bit, quote unquote, more functional. So what I want everyone to do before we move on from here is once you pull the arm back, elbow to the rib cage, I want you to take your left leg and step back with it. And step forward. Good. And reach the arm forward. You'll notice how when you do that, it adds a little bit more. Right? And you also notice
you might need a little slack in your band too. If it's a really heavy band, you might need to pop up a little bit closer. If it's too heavy, it might not let you.
And as you step back and forth with this, you'll notice that it's very similar to your gait pattern. I promise it was intentional.
Can you demo this?
So, arm forward, slight bend in the elbow, rotate in. Okay, you weren't getting this because this band's really heavy. That's why. Okay. Elbow back to the rib cage, step back, pull. Pull and push. If you have a black or purple band, it might be a little heavy for you.
Yeah.
Okay, then you step forward, open up the rib cage, nice and tall, just like that clock exercise we were just doing. Step back, stretch with it. Looks good, Becky. Want to try it again?
As you reach your
That's
left
why
hand
the
forward,
band's heavy.
just think about reaching through that shoulder blade again, just like we started with. So it's the hand that's free. So as you step back, really reach through that front arm, pull back with your row, reach through the left arm. So that's going to help get that rotation. Really reach through that shoulder blade. Reach here, reach here. Yeah, there you go. Do you feel that difference? Yeah. It'll be a little bit extra stretch. Yeah, there you go.
Should this hand turn like this or stay down when it comes back?
It should
turn.
Yeah. Hand starts face down, ends facing your rib cage. Hand starts face down, ends facing your rib cage. Boom and boom. Does that make sense, everyone? What questions do we have on this one?
You can try the other side if you'd like to not be asymmetrical.
Really strong.
Balance it out.
Right.
Just do a couple on the other side. Couple on the other side. See if you can set it up on the other side and do the same. Find that same motion. You might feel differences there. So start with just the row and the reach. Yeah.
Row and reach.
Yeah.
Elbow to the rib cage, hand forward, drive, drive, drive. Once you're comfortable with that, you can throw in that step backwards. The step back is the hard part.
Yeah.
Funny.
It's really hard with the tight bands too.
Yeah.
You have to be just the right spot.
Yeah. Doesn't give you much of a leeway. Good. Nice. You guys are finding good rotation. Looks great.
So like I said, there's a lot you can do with this exercise, but I want you to just understand the principle of that row and the relationship that the arm, the rib cage, the rotator cuff muscles, shoulder blade, all of it, and how it syncs together with your running, right? Obviously, when you're running, you're not going to be doing, this. I get that, but I want you to think about it as you're running. This is a great exercise routine to do after your runs, all right? You can add them in post runs. You don't need to do this one every day, right? More on the strength side. If you're new to that around 15 reps likely. If you're ready to load it, less than 10.
And it's just that accentuated motion just really helps you so when you accentuate the motion, you can feel a little bit of that more small, subtle detail rotation motion. So you can feel a little bit more of that rotation through your trunk too. So yeah, you're not gonna be running with your arms out here like this, but it's just that subtle rotation. So you start to gain some awareness of what's happening at your rib cage too, and with your arm swing. So excellent. Moving on.
Any questions on the rib cage stuff? Cool. We're going to jump to the feet next. Everyone's favorite. That's why we're all barefoot. So right off the bat with the gait pattern, when you are landing in what is called initial contact, your foot is actually going to be slightly turned out in what is called supination. Okay? As you put all of your weight on your foot, you're going to go into what is called pronation. All right? That's when the arch is going to completely flatten out. Okay? And as you push off, you're pushing off the big toe. So a lot of times you'll hear supination, pronation. Which one do I do? What kind of shoe should I be in? Things like that. You do both. So we're going to kind of dispel that right off the bat. You do both. The degree in which you do is kind of the question of necessarily like what shoes potentially, but that's, like Meleah was saying, it's a conversation for another day. For now, understand that you do both of them, all right? As you land, you supinate. As you go through, you pronate. All right? Pronation and where it should come from, since that's the one typically we see as in the field, we see a lot more of like overpronation or maybe locked up pronation. You don't see a lot of it on the supination side. Sometimes you do, but I think I've seen that one time in all of the gait analysis work I've done. Okay? Now, where pronation is coming from. Your body wants to pronate. It's the ability to absorb the force, right? So you got to find it one way or another. If it's locked up and coming from, rotation of the foot outwards, that's not necessarily an amazing thing. Something that I struggle with and I've worked with Meleah a lot on, okay? If it's coming from a different, like the knees causing more absorption, or if it's getting locked up in the hip, right? That's not good, right? And again, the body will find a way to absorb force. We want it to come from the arch, all right? We want our feet to be strong and we want them to be able to pronate, quote unquote, correctly or as correctly for your body, right? So before we get into some specific exercises for the feet, the last thing I want everyone to understand is that with the foot, there are 3 main points of contact. The first met head, the fifth met head, and the heel. All right, you can just think about it as heel, right on this medial inner portion of the foot, and then on the lateral portion of the foot. So if you just stand right now and shift your weight kind of backwards, you'll feel it shift to the heels, right? If you shift forward, you'll feel it shift to that top of the toe box. If you shift a little bit to the side, you might feel a little bit on the inside, on the outside, right? Just kind of playing around with that. All right? Now, you can do this next exercise standing, but you might want to all be seated for it. It's a little bit of a funky one. With unlocking the feet, a lot of us, with our shoes we wear, with the exercises we do on a regular basis, if you're lifting in gym shoes and not barefoot, I'm not saying you need to lift barefoot by any means, biking, running in closed-toed shoes, things like that, high heels, it's going to really confine our feet, all right? We want to keep our feet very mobile. So we're going to go over a few exercises to do that. The first one is what we call toe yoga. And this exercise looks yoga. It looks very simple, but it's actually very, very hard. And it took me quite a while to do it. Okay. So essentially what I want you to do is everyone's going to keep their feet straight, flat on the ground. You can do 1 foot at a time, which I'd recommend doing 1 foot at a time if you're starting out. And I want you to attempt, don't beat yourself up if it doesn't go amazing, attempt to lift the big toe off the ground while keeping all the other toes on the ground. It's a lot harder than it looks, but I'm telling you, the first time I did this, I couldn't even lift my big toe off the ground.
So as you lift your big toe, yeah.
I can move my big toe. Now, sorry, were you saying something?
Oh, just watch for cramping. This can make your feet cramp like crazy too.
Yeah.
So just beware.
Mm-hmm. Now we're going to push the big toe back down, and we're going to try to lift all the other toes up off the ground while the big toe stays flat. You're killing it right now. You got a lot better mobility.
You got it.
All right, and we're going to go back and forth with that. Once that feels kind of good, you can start doing both feet back and forth. Back and forth.
I'm like staring at it.
You guys fail at this, you have to stay here all day.
Yeah. Well,
And do it until you can't. Becky, how are your feet? Good.
I'm better at my right than my left.
You'll definitely find one that's better than the other. 100%.
It's hard. Yeah.
All right, that's the mobility of the toes and all of the muscles there. It's very important. Now you're already kind of doing what the next exercise is. It's called foot doming. When you keep the big toe down and you lift all the other toes up off the ground. We're going to basically go through what the arch should do in pronation. And well, in the whole gait, but we're going to emphasize the pronation portion of it, okay? So the exercise we're going to attempt to do next is, if you think about your arch of the foot, we're going to try to make the arch come up, and we're going to try to make the arch flatten back and forth, all right? While keeping all the toes on the ground. So there's a few different ways you can kind of think about this. This is one that's very, again, just weird and hard to do, okay? So the first way you can think about it is, if you actually, when you lift all the other toes off the ground, that's going to kind of let you control the arch and lift it up off the ground. So you can kind of think about, like, okay, this is what this is supposed to feel like. We want to get to a point where we can lift the arch off the ground without needing to lift the pinky toes up. But if you need to kind of know what that feels like, you're automatically doming a little bit when you flatten the big toe and press all the other toes up, okay? Once you kind of understand that, the next goal is, you think about having a finger underneath the arch of your foot. Try to create a ton of space for that finger. Then try to push that finger into the ground as much as possible. While, if you feel your calf muscles start to activate, if you feel that lateral outside malleolus, the ankle bones start to kind of maybe cramp up a little bit, you're doing too much with other muscles. All right, we're trying to just work that arch down into the floor and then squeeze up.
So it might change based on, so if you look at your arches just in neutral, some of you have really high arches, and that's just your natural position. So what you will work on is trying to lengthen that arch, so flatten that arch into the floor. Some of you have flatter arches, so your work is to try to lift and then control both of those motions. So just pay attention based on your foot structure too. Neither is good nor bad, but just having motion into both directions is really, really good or helpful. So if you have questions. Great question. Yeah.
So with flattening the arch, because that's actually what we're about to do kind of next, more in depth. Let's go into the next exercise, because we're going to flatten the arch a lot in it. Everyone, I don't know, I'm taking you right. Everyone's going to come forward and take a kneel. When you flatten the arch of the foot, you want to think about essentially the whole foot pressing into the ground as much as possible and driving away the big toe from the heel. When you flatten the arch, though, you don't want to do this, right? You don't want to excessively rotate inwards.
Are we accomplishing that by putting weight on it, or are we accomplishing
Correct. Yeah.
foot muscles?
Yeah.
Yeah. You can put some weight into it. Yep. You just don't want to, again, you don't want to put like an excessive amount of weight into it, right? So this next exercise is going to let you kind of practice that. We're going to take a kneeling position. We're going to shift the hips slightly back. When we shift the hips back, you can start to raise that arch up, right? This is in your gait pattern right before you go into that pronation station. Pronation station. Look at that.
Very
Okay?
good.
As you shift the weight forward, now you're going to have that opportunity to flatten the foot, right? This is mid stance of your gait. This position we're in right now is practice absorbing without actually absorbing the whole body weight, right? You're going to come out and you're going to go forward. So you might see people at the gym sometimes do this exercise where they're up against the wall and trying to tap their knee to the wall. It's a fantastic exercise, but correct. So a lot of times we do it for the ankle, and there's nothing wrong with that. I think that's great. However, it's a good opportunity to also work on the foot. So this is one exercise that you should be doing barefoot pretty religiously if you can. Again, you can do it right before you run. 10, 15 reps each side. Just work on flattening the foot and coming back in. You can even throw a band around the arch of your foot so that it starts to emphasize taking the foot out of pronation. Good. Ideally, you lift the arch up a little bit. Yeah, come completely through that range of motion. All right, do a couple more on this side and then switch to the other side.
So as you come back, try to relax your foot as much as you can. I know it's hard for you on that side. As you come forward, try to lengthen that arch. Yeah, let it kind of lengthen.
One thing that helps too is a little cue. So if you put like a piece of paper there, try to squeeze the piece of paper.
And just relax, it should come up automatically. Yeah, you shouldn't have to do much to let it come up. Because you
My
have that
feet are
high arch
so
on that side.
Positivity.
So as you come back, it should just come up automatically. Yep. Yep, exactly. And as you come back, don't let that big toe lift.
Nice and
Here,
straight.
keep
There you
grounding.
go. Try to
Big toe
squeeze
that
my
you don't
finger
like
as
to.
you're
Yep,
coming
there you go.
down or forward. There you
I'm
go.
like going in like that.
Without-
I know that's like
right?
it's
So-
usually I feel like I can do it here.
Wow, Luana just brings up a good point here. If you're going into this and you start going forward and you're like, I can only get this far without my knee dipping in. That's your range of motion. All right, listen to that. Don't try to overcompensate somewhere else in the body to get more pronation or to unlock more pronation. All right, meet your body where it's at, just like anything else. And the next rep, maybe try to go a little further. And the next day, a little further. Next week, a little further, right? So that you get that unlocked properly and you don't overcompensate for it.
It's not like I feel like something hurts or whatnot. I feel like I could go all the way down and there's just, it's not going any further.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
I mean, to the limitations of like,
Yeah. That's good, Jackie.
If you can keep your big toe on.
We did this exercise on Luana a long time ago. We massaged her post-tib
Don't let it go.
during it.
Don't
I don't know if
let
you
it go.
remember that.
remember that.
Yeah. So when you do this, you can also put like
Right.
the foot
Yeah.
on a, a cookie. Put the toe on a weighted cookie. Yeah, a little 2.5. 2.5 plates.
Oh.
I mean, you could
Yeah.
could do a real cookie if you wanted to.
Yeah, don't let your, also pay attention to your other toes too, if they're gripping the ground a lot. See if you can let those go. Yeah, there you go.
Might just be a sign that I'm tight in my hips, but I'm not really feeling it like ankle or foot.
So as you come back, so you have a fairly lower arch to begin with, so you might not feel it in your ankle. When you come back, see if you can keep big toe. So your job is to supinate. So you want to keep your big toe on the ground as you come back. And that should help to lift. So think about lifting there. So you're maybe focused on the other phase.
Yeah.
Yeah. And with that lift, see if you can keep your lift here. Keep it engaged. Don't let it just fall. Keep it engaged as you move that knee forward now. As you translate forward. Yeah. So don't just let it go right away. Kind of expand or eccentrically load into it a little bit more. Yeah, there you go.
Better.
Yeah.
Nice job, everyone.
Good. Find a new foot things.
And once you get the hang of it, you can do these again, just right before a run. 10 each side will take 30 seconds. Very quick, in and out. We need to keep the mobility specifically in those muscles. It's very important so we can absorb force properly. When everyone's good.
Would this like help?
It can. Yeah. It can be good for lengthening because anytime you're going into that pronation position, you're trying to lengthen your plantar fascia too. So yeah, so keeping that mobile and stretched out. Yeah, very much so. And your control into that motion is huge. So a lot of times when you get plantar fasciitis, it's like you're lacking that control into pronation. So it's depending on that soft tissue more than it is the muscle. So it's repetitive stress. Yeah, exactly. Yep.
Questions on the unlock of the foot?
Chris, for getting your arch to come up better, at least on the sides where it's up, relaxing. Is that just where the foot is, or is it that others are musculature that can help that arch be more?
To lifting. Mm-hmm. Yeah, sometimes it'll deal with that gets into a whole another aspect too, like what is your heel doing? So that would be like an individual situation we can look at. So like if your heel or the heel is locked up a little bit too, it may determine what happens into your forefoot too. So we'll look at that later, and we could do some like posting on one side or the other of your heel. Yeah, and that may help drive a little bit more too. Yeah.
I've also found with like runners specifically, most of us there's a muscle called your posterior tibialis that's responsible for holding the arch of the foot up, and a lot of us just destroy the shit out of that with how much pounding we're doing. So a lot of times if you take either a lacrosse ball foam roller and you roll this inner portion right below the tibia, or you can use your thumbs. It's just if you're using your thumb, you're probably not going to be able to do as much as like someone else or using like a tool, just because the pain can sometimes outweigh our motives. So so that muscle, a lot of times if you're having trouble with the arch lifting up, giving that a little love and attention, that can definitely help that as well. Next, we're going to go over some stability exercises for the feet. These ones, again, you can do them right before you run, or you can do them after you run during weightlifting sessions. So I did yesterday. Jack saw me in the gym jumping around on things. So everyone's going to hop up. One of the most humbling exercises that I've ever done is simply standing on one foot, going up on your toes, coming down, slightly bending the leg, and absorbing and freezing. Up on one foot, absorb and freeze. Up on one foot, absorb and freeze. Yeah. Well, so if you can, you'll if you can get up as high as you can. The goal is to eventually jump and land, but we're controlling stability throughout that entire range of motion, right? It's amazing what a little body weight exercise can do. So come up like this and then down. Yeah. Up on the toes. Yep, and then down. Yeah. Good. Try some on both sides. And then notice what your foot's doing right after all those exercises we just did. Right? What is the tendency now that we made it a little bit more dynamic? What does the foot immediately want to do? Think about that.
It gets complex too because you can't take out what's happening at your hip or your knee either. So you may actually feel a little bit of work happening in your hip too, or quite a bit of work helping you stabilize. So it's a really good whole body, whole chain exercise too. So if you're having difficulty coordinating what's happening at your foot, you could always kind of find a wall to hold on to, something just to help you stabilize a little bit. And that might help you just give a little bit better control if you're needing it.
Once you feel comfortable doing that, you can start hopping. Jump, squeeze. Jump, squeeze. You can start hopping further. You can start hopping forward and backwards. You can start hopping side to side, diagonally.
Yeah.
I love to see any runner I'm working with. I love to see them doing things like this. You can do things like jump rope or just hop on one leg. I think that's very beneficial as well. But again, the ability to actually practice absorbing force is going to give you a lot of bang for your buck. Because when we run, every time we take a step, we are doing what we're doing right now. Good.
So the single leg hop is a very complex exercise. A lot of balance required, yeah.
Seems very easy.
Yeah.
It's not.
And like it's the phrase of like running is just all like a single leg, like landing on a single leg, which it is, but like this is slowed down, so you have to have so much more control too. So this is challenging exercise.
Any questions on the unlock portion of the foot or the stability portion of the foot?
You good?
If you want to take us through the last
Sure.
one.
So the last one we have, it's similar to kind of things we've done so far. So what I'm going to have you do here is you're going to come into that split stance position. So one foot's going to come slightly forward. Okay. So here we're going to isolate how well your calf, specifically your soleus, can work. It's going to be a whole body exercise because you have to hold yourself in this position. Okay. So if you're in this position, I want to see if you can lower down. So it's like you're going to keep your shoulders over your hips, lower down in like you're doing a lunge position here. Okay. And try to keep yourself stabilized here. So hips are going to be square. From this position, we're going to really isolate your front foot. So what you're going to do is you're just going to come up onto your big toe, stay over that big toe, and then you're going to slowly let it come back down. And if they're shaking, you know you're doing it right. Okay, so keep your hips stable, yep, up and over your big toe. So you're really working of keeping that arch position, that stability of your foot as you come up and over, yep, and then go ahead and let it control back down. So slow and controlled. Okay. Yes, absolutely, yeah. Yeah, so it's going to be difficult if you have a different position of your first ray, for sure. You're probably not going to get up and over your big foot as much, or your big toe as much. So good question, but also good. So if you can think about that position of your foot, maybe just think about loading through your first ray. So for you, like this position here, see if you can take that toe and just kind of let it come out to the side here. Keep it there, and now come up and over that big toe. Yeah, so you're also starting to learn how to load through your big toe, and that right there is your push off of your running gait. Your foot is or your leg is gonna be in a different position, but that is the key position for it, okay? If you really want to challenge yourself and don't like yourself, bring your foot up and hold, okay? Hold that position, just hold that isometric position, really keep that foot stability, keep that front stability, yep, and you're gonna feel almost like your hips, your leg, everything starts to shake, but that'll really solidify that motion that you want up and over your big toe. So with the bunion position, this might be a good one too, so you keep grounding through that big toe, but still raising that arch. So you're finding that static position first, that isometric position first, before you get into that control of your foot and ankle. Yeah.
Are we focusing on the met head, pushing through the met head, or are we focusing on the big toe at the end of the big toe?
Great question. The met head. So his question was, where are we focusing on the foot? So either the big toe, right? So your big toe here, like pushing your big toe down here, or the met head. So this is the head of your big toe, or the metatarsal head. So think about pressing through that. If you think about pressing through the head portion or the end of that big toe, not the end of your big toe, but your met head here, you're going to get that extending out into your big toe. Yep. So you're thinking about that. It's almost like a lever over your big toe. Yep.
This is a great one to think about your hips too, and keeping them straight and forward. Don't let the back leg turn out at all. Or in.
Good. All right. Questions on that one? Good.
Our last component.
Last phase here. Right, are you ready? Take a little break. Okay, so hips here. So we know how important it is to keep hips strong, right? We always get that messaging. So we need strong glutes to help keep us stable as we run. We know that. But also in the same breath, we also need them to be mobile. Okay, so we need them to be strong yet mobile. And that's oftentimes the piece that we miss when we're just focusing all strength. Okay, so when you focus strength, you're keeping everything stable, especially if you're doing like bilateral lifts, things like that. They're always going to be in a stable position, so you can almost lock them down. Also, if you have pain, tendency is to lock everything down so you don't get as much motion. But super important to keep hips mobile here. So the more mobility and control you have in your hips, the more fluid your running motion will be. And so the limitation I see most often with running gait is that hip extension. And that's where people get into problems down the road, is that you lose that extension. So hips are here. Oftentimes it's that backswing that people lose here. Or if it's not coming directly, if you're not getting hip motion, you're starting to get it from your back, your upper back, your spine. You're going to get it from other places if you don't get it from the front of your hips. Okay, so keeping your hips opened up is super important in just overall health of your hips, your joints, your body overall. But we also know that they have to generate power and provide stability. Okay, so we're going to go through a series of mobility exercises for hips. Okay, so just like the rib cage, the hips should move in all three planes of motion. Okay, so we should get like a forward backward motion, we should get side to side motion. It's harder to test that motion with our hips because you just can't feel it. Okay, so we're going to get you in a couple different positions where you can feel, maybe a little bit where you're feeling restricted. And then, so as it's the same thing with the rib cage, is that they should be equal and opposite. So as my right hip is behind me, my left hip should be forward. Okay, and same thing, pelvis is actually leading the motion. So pelvis is behind me here on this side, pelvis is forward on this side. Okay, and as I run and take a step, it switches in opposite. So it's the opposite motion. Okay, so equal and opposite motions. And again, same thing with the rib cage. When you find limitations on one side, it's going to restrict your running and your form. So you may not feel the same on both sides. Okay, so what I'm going to have you do, we all have a block here. So you just need one yoga block. Okay, and what you're going to do is you're going to come down onto hands and knees, and you're going to bring the yoga block under one knee. Okay. All right, so yoga block is under one knee. So this is meant to tell you to bring your awareness to how well your hips can kind of rotate from forward and backward motion. Okay, so a lot of times the more strength training we do, we get a lot of tightness through the back of our hips. So this is meant to help keep open up through the back of your hips as well. So from this position, if you just stay on your hands, okay, you're going to bring your opposite knee up so it's level to that to the block. Okay, so what you're going to do from here is you're going to let that free knee come and travel down towards the floor. Okay, and then you're going to lift that knee back up so it's level, and then you can lift even a little bit higher. Okay, so as you're doing this, you probably don't feel a ton here yet, but as you're doing this, think about there's like a pane of glass between your knees or between your thighs. So keep your legs as parallel as you can. Okay, and you still might not feel a ton here, but I want you to just get that general motion of lifting up through hips. So anybody feel a stretch through the back of the hip right now? Nothing? Core? You feel core? I like it. Good. Yep. Perfect.
I'm assuming
We'll take it. Yeah. Okay. So let's take it a step further. Exactly. Yeah. So from here, hands are here. What I'm going to have you do now is you're going to drop to your elbows. So come down into the elbow down position. So you're closing down the front of your hip a little bit more. Now, there we go. I like it. Okay. Now you're going to feel some stretch through the back of your hip there. Okay. So as you're there, drop that opposite knee towards the floor, and then go ahead and lift that opposite knee back up. So as you can feel, it's not just a mobility exercise, it's also strengthening. Sneaky. But you should be using a lot of those outer hip muscles also, okay? Is anybody not feeling anything here?
Everyone looks good.
Nope. Got it. So make sure that kneeling hip stays right over top of your knee. Okay, the tendency is that hip will start to shoot out to the side. You'll start to get a little bit of side to side motion. So really feel that opening. Yep, if you put hand on the back of your hip, you're going to feel kind of that opening or that stretching through the back side of hip there.
Is it good?
Good. Okay, excellent.
All right, one more minute.
Yeah. When you're done, switch sides. So when you said you wouldn't sweat, that wasn't true. Yeah.
Oh, I was wrong right away.
And then pay attention to, do you feel the same thing here as you did the other side? Is it same, worse, same, not worse, but same or different? There you go. Different. Yep, one side might be easier. Yeah, and then when you feel like you have the motion, drop to your elbows also. You might feel a little bit tighter motion there. Yeah. Good.
Best post 10-mile routine ever, huh?
I thought that was snow angels in the carpet.
Yeah. Nap on the couch. Yeah.
We started with the breathing, and then that was
Yeah.
a little bit of a catfish.
He totally was. Yeah, totally.
Do you want to do this one on treads, or should we?
Yeah, probably the treadmill or the chairs.
Yeah.
One of the two, if that works.
Yeah.
All right, good. Questions on that one at all? Yeah.
Are you trying
Yeah.
to keep your hips over the top, or are you trying to, or especially if you're in this?
Correct.
Are
Yeah,
you trying to sit back?
correct. So in ideal, it would be right over top of your knee. But as you move forward or backward, you might feel that stretch in different places, right? So wherever you're tightest. So if you're going to be tighter in your lower glute, you'll probably come back a little bit lower because you get that glide of your hip to come back a little bit lower posterior glute versus forward. You might not feel as much coming forward in that position. Good question. Yeah.
So is there like a progression in that, or are you trying to?
Not with this one. Not with this one specific. If someone can't get it.
Into that position, like on their elbows.
If they can't get into that, so a place to start there first, you mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
If they need to start back and then get their hips back.
Yeah. Good question. I think it's better typically if you can start forward, because the more tendency you have to come back, especially if they have any hip issues, your TFL is going to get in the way. So you're going to get a lot of tightness through TFL. But then that means they also need that backward motion. So start forward and then work to back if they're having trouble doing it. Yeah. Or just do it without the block too. Less motion also too. Yeah. Good. All right, next one. Okay, so with this one, we want a surface that's like knee height for you. So that will probably be a chair, or treadmill's a little low, but we can try it.
I'm pretty
Okay. Okay, so this is how we're gonna work your hip extension motion. And so what you're gonna do is you're going to be standing facing the chair. Actually, let me borrow this chair for a second. Okay. So you're gonna be standing facing the chair. Okay, you wanna be about a step length back from the chair. So it's going to look kind of just like a hip flexor stretch, but there's a little bit more detail into it. So it's gonna be your step, bring your foot to the step, and then kind of rotate and lean into it, and then come back. Okay, so foot's gonna come to the step. As your foot comes to the step, I want you to try to rotate towards that front knee. So belly button rotates towards your front knee to lift and bring foot up. Okay, and then you're gonna come back. So every time you lean forward, you're gonna rotate a little bit towards that front knee and then come back. Okay, so go ahead and give it a try and we'll talk you through it. Okay, so foot like step distance away from the, everybody have one?
Give it a little
We can
more
take that one.
height.
Step distance away from the, the
Tread.
step. Okay, and as you come forward, what I want you to think about is belly button. If it helps you to keep kind of hands at your belly button here, like forward. So hands are here, this is your rudder. And as you lean forward, as you come into that front knee, belly button's gonna point towards that knee. So if that helps with you with your hands, and then come back, okay? All right, what's everyone feeling here? Yes, from the hips, yeah. So we're working that coordination, or kind of closing down your front hip, but you're feeling almost a stretch through that back leg, back hip. And with that back leg in that position, we think about that's your push-off position as you're running, right? So that's how you get that foot behind you. If you feel any tightness or restriction through the front of your hip,
You take your back foot.
yep, and it's going to be a little bit of
And
that
do
rotation.
this.
If you don't feel anything, let me know. We'll see if we can adjust you a little bit.
Back foot straight. Back foot straight.
Yeah. So that little bit of rotation is just going to wind up that back hip flexor. Get it on a little bit of stretch. Good. Focusing really strongly here. I like it. A lot to think about. Okay, if that feels okay, what you can think about is you can just bring up that foot up and down. So as you bring that foot up, as soon as that foot comes off the floor, you're going to rotate towards that side. So up and rotate to the step, and then back down. Okay, so it's that step and rotate towards that side. That's our motion of our hip as we're running there. Okay, yep. And so think about, I want you to try to keep, so bring your hands to belly button here. So what I want you to do is you're going to try to keep your shoulders as square. So watch where your upper trunk motion's coming from also, because if you get it just from your shoulders, you might not feel as much. So keep your shoulders square as you bring that leg up. Try to just rotate through belly button. So rotate through core. You're going to get some upper body, but try not to let it drive from your upper body. Yeah, there you go. Does that feel a little bit different? There you go. And switch sides if you haven't already.
And I feel like my shoulders are totally
They're going to turn a little bit, but try not to let that be the driver of your motion.
Keep it in the core.
Keep it in your core. So it's a really subtle motion. So as soon as you pick up that leg, you're rotating, your belly button's rotating towards that knee. What do we have for time?
Oh, we could just finish this slide. It's probably good.
All right, good. Questions on that one at all? Okay, so that's a really good one. So you're thinking about as that foot comes up, it's that back hip that we're really working, right? So you're working to really get that hip behind you without cheating through your trunk or your core as well too. So you might feel that lengthening through the back hip. Okay?
You feel enough lengthening and
Yep.
you progress it, you just lower the step. Or you raise the step.
Raise the step probably. Yeah. Yep.
Or you can also add weights in eventually.
Yeah.
We're going to do a little strength exercise
Mhm.
if you wanted to as well.
Yeah. And maybe that's not the motion you need. Maybe it's a little bit
That could
different
also
motion.
be true.
Yeah.
With a lot
so
of
that
these,
might be a
if they're
different
like,
progression of motion too. Yeah.
if a lot of those like first two on the slide get easy, you might need another motion or something else, or maybe you're just perfect. It's possible too.
So much work needed.
All right, good. And then we're going to get into strength.
Last exercise, we're going to go over the single leg RDL. So if you're in class on Thursday, we went over this already, but we're going to do it a little differently. We're going to do what we did in class and then a little differently. So first, one way I like to kind of have everyone understand this, think again about the hips and what they're doing, all right? When we are taking a step forward and completely loading it, the hips, there should be a slight dip down on the opposite side. We don't want an excessive amount, right? But we're going to work on strengthening that portion of it in relation to the gait, okay? So first, before we go against the wall, I want everyone to actually just take 1 foot forward like we were before. Back leg is going to be kind of like a kickstand position, all right? And I want you to think about slightly dipping the knee down towards the ground, and you might feel a little stretch in that back glute region. Kind of like that first exercise Meleah just walked us through with the block. Let that hip slightly dip down. Squeeze that glute on the opposite, or on the side that's lengthened, working. Squeeze that glute and bring the other leg forward.
So the forward leg starts to dip a little bit.
Correct,
And then
yep.
it brings forward.
Correct, yep. Yeah. We're just taking it through the range of motion. We're putting together essentially those first two exercises, and we're going to make it a little bit more strength focused for this specific one. All right. One of the early premises of more of a lateral RDL. All right. Once you kind of feel comfortable with that, you can remove the kickstand eventually and work on sticking the butt back, squeezing the glute forward, hiking the hip. We did this on Thursday in a class I teach, and we spent a good 10 minutes doing it on each side, and everyone was very, very much talking about their butt afterward. At girls' night. So try a couple more on that side, and then go to the other side. And then I think we can find walls and do that version as well. Just along the wall. So when I do this, exercise, a lot of times I'll hold on to something when I start loading with weight. And I'll put the weight right on my knee, but I'll hold. Because if I'm working on stability, I don't really need a lot of weight, and you're doing that right now, right? If I want to load these muscle groups, I want to load these muscle groups. And I'm not really worried about balance in that position, right? If you start to do exercises like that and you're using a ton of weight to the point where now you start using other muscles to try to compensate for balancing, that's usually an issue. I'd rather you hold on to something, and this gets a little bit outside of what this class is, but if you have questions, feel free to ask afterwards. I'd rather you hold on to something, hold the weight, dip down, squeeze, and let your arm help you.
Kind of keep the strength be strength and the balance be
Exactly.
balance.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Then the last way we're going to talk about doing this exercise, everyone's going to find a wall. And again, we're going to have to just kind of make space in here. So that is a slightly different variation of an RDL that I learned actually somewhat recently that I really like because it kind of takes into that lateral portion that Meleah was talking about earlier that the hips need to do. This one we're going to do is the one that's pictured there, and it's more of just that backwards motion. All right, so before we do, go ahead. Before we do anything, I want everyone to line against the wall and take one step forward, and I want them to slightly bend their knees. This is an exercise that's really just very better understood when we do it with both legs first. Now, you're going to pretend like you have a drawer right behind you, and you're going to push it in with your butt. Squeeze the butt to come forward and bring those hips in and out. You'll feel a nice stretch in the hamstrings. You all look beautiful. Now, stay in the exact footing position you're in, and I want you to bring one foot up and flatten it against the wall behind you. Ideally, again, like Meleah was saying earlier, the thighs are parallel. They're in line with each other. So if you have one foot, super far forward and you're in this type of position, it's probably not going to work balance-wise. You want them to be nice and close to each other. And you're going to do exactly what we just did with two legs on one. I want you to think about and use that balance leg for balance. Use it. That's why it's there. Think about sticking that butt back, lengthening through that hamstring and glute. Then squeeze the glute, hips forward. Back and forward. Work in and out of that a few times. From the hips up the spine, one area I tend to see a lot of people get into trouble with is we start rounding the back.
Which part of the back? Whole thing? Or
Good question. Depends. Typically the low back is where I see it, but you do sometimes see through it the whole. Usually it's just the low back, but then that turns into the upper back also rounding, right? But a lot of times it comes from that low back. If you can think about your spine and your core and what you're doing in this positioning and you stabilize from the core, the rest of the spine will typically follow. So we want to think about the spine being a flat wooden board. And as we stick back, we're bracing for impact that whole time. Belly button is braced and tucked. And the back is just simply moving forward and backward. This is not a back exercise. You may feel it in your back. You may work some accessory muscles in your back. It's not a back exercise, though.
feels good. You know what I mean? It just feels so good.
Yeah, so it's funny you bring that up. This is one of those exercises that when runners do it strength-wise, you leave the gym, maybe not the first time you do it, but typically you leave the gym and you go, wow, that felt good. Like the next day your run usually feels better. It's one of those exercises. Most runners, I would say 90% will benefit from this. It's usually very, very good. All right. Last little addition to this to kind of put it together with what we talked about in the very first slide with the row is you can actually start adding a little bit of a row component. So as you stick your butt back, you can do that reach forward. You can add a dumbbell. You could put a cable. It's a little advanced because you'd have to set it up a certain way and not use a wall. But you can have a dumbbell and you can row as you come forward. Once you get comfortable with that, the knee can come off the wall and you drive forward. Imagine that dumbbell, reach towards the ground, stretch that glute, squeeze the glute forward. So as the glute is in its extremely stretched position, for whatever that is for you, the arm is in that stretched position.
You got to reach forward.
Correct.
You can pull with the weight.
Correct. Yeah. Yeah. If you're holding a weight, you let the weight take you. Yep. For right now, we don't need a weight for this exercise, but And then as you start squeezing the glute, that's when you start to do that row positioning, right? And then you would reach forward with the opposite hand. Make sense? The single leg RDL is arguably, in my opinion, one of the best strength exercises for runners. Either this or Bulgarian split squats.
When it's done right.
When it's done
Like you are all doing right now.
And something we were talking just a little bit ago about how, let balance be balance and strength be strength. I'll walk into weight rooms and I'll see people on like a blue pad on a BOSU ball trying to do this exercise. And that in itself is not necessarily wrong. What's wrong is if we are doing that and overcompensating in areas to the point where we're not working the muscles we want to work in these exercises. So let your ego take you in endurance, sure, in the weight room. Just do things to benefit the bod and put your ego aside. Actually, don't let your ego take you in endurance either. Questions on that exercise?
Or hips in general.
Or hips in general.
Or any of it so far. All right.
Do you want to go that side or
Doesn't
do you
matter.
want to? It's 11:15.
We can go on.
All right, good.
All right. Questions at all? Here's your moment.
We threw a lot
time.
at you. A lot at you.
I was just gonna say,
A lot,
can you
yeah.
send us the slides? Or
Yeah,
like
we can get them to you.
something of the
Yeah.
because I'll probably forget. And
So the first two, everything that's not strength that we did before runs. But it doesn't mean like if you're gonna do it after a run, it's gonna be bad for you. It's also I did it before my strength session. So ideally you do it before run, but I'd rather you do it, every other day or as much as possible at some point, right? Strength, pretty much always do after your runs. And ideally it's like 5+ hours later. But we're not in an ideal world. So if you need to do it afterwards. And if you have to just get it in beforehand. That's okay too. But ideally afterwards. Yeah. Yep. And start with body weight movements on all of those. And then you can start progressing them to weighted things. And if you have questions, you can reach out to me or Meleah, obviously. I mean, in a perfect world, you would do your aerobic training in the morning, and then we would do 10 hours. Like at night, we would do the strength, and then we would sleep. But also not too late either. It's more of like if you do, if you go for a run, that's not just a warm up run, but like whatever your runs look like, right? Probably more than 20 minutes. If you go above 20 minutes and then you go into the weight room and strength train, you're probably not going to get the same result, and you're probably going to run into some of the similar things we would run into if we were doing improper strength training mechanics in general, right? You're probably not hitting the right things. So I like to get a full meal in, take a nap. And then go back. I know, so that's why I'm saying.
World, yeah.
It's not an ideal world,
Yeah.
But I had someone once tell me too that if you have a 5-mile run and you only have the exact amount of time to do the 5-mile run, sacrifice a half a mile and do the mobility stuff. All right, that's going to help you more. Longevity is the name of the game. Consistency is the name of the game. This is how you stay consistent.
thank you.
Thanks for coming.
Thanks for coming, guys. Yeah. Yeah, my office is down in Edina.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so just right off of 100 in Edina. Yeah.
I'm a